Welcome to week 92 of Misha Dianne with Santa Barbara.
You push the wrong button, I'm more dangerous than 3 Mile Island.
The first word that something was seriously wrong came from this power plant in eastern Sweden, where workers coming on the job registered abnormally high levels of radiation on their bodies.
There has been an accident at the Chernobyl atomic power station. One of the atomic reactors was damaged.
It's near the city of Kiev, population 2.5 million, and about 1,000 miles from Scandinavia, meaning that whatever did occur there, a radioactive cloud headed north across Poland today and into Denmark, where radiation levels were 5 times normal, to Finland 6 times normal, to Norway up 50%, and Sweden illegally high.
It is far worse than the 3 Mile Island incident of 1979.
At 3 Mile Island, there was a partial meltdown. The loss of cooling water led to fuel getting so hot it melted, but the core was contained by that thick concrete containment building. In the Soviet accident, there would be nothing to stop a meltdown. The hot core could have melted right into the earth. Officially, little comment from the president or his aides.
Welcome to week 92 of Misha and Dianne with Santa Barbara.
Hello.
And over the weekend I came back to Kelowna, and yesterday Chernobyl exploded. As I mentioned, my friend Jonas was in Sweden, so as you can imagine, it was troubling to hear that the radioactive cloud was headed right for Sweden. So yeah, we saw that Chernobyl documentary that aired a couple of years ago. It was pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Not surprising that the Russians hit so much, though.
And we saw the docudrama that was based on it. I don't know if that was a BBC production or not, but it had Toby Jones in it, and Jared Harris, I think, was in it as well.
Mm-hmm. Interesting to think that Challenger explosion and Chernobyl explosion just happened 3 months apart in the same year. You know, you kind of forget those things.
Mm-hmm.
Robert Newman, who is currently playing Kirk Cranston for us, he has just wrapped up a stint on The Young and the Restless in the year 2022. Also, in between recordings of this podcast, we watched A Policewoman, and excited to see Joe Mascolo, who played Stefano DiMera on Santa Barbara, but also Timothy Gibbs was in, I think it was Police Story that we saw. He'll be showing up as Dash Nichols in a few years on Santa Barbara.
I think I saw Joe Mascola on Lou Grant.
Wow, okay. I had just written down Policewoman for both of these, and they're both wrong.
We did see Carrie Sherman
on Policewoman. Yeah, that was kind of fun. She jumped off a building, and then we watched an episode of The Rookies right after, and Carmen Zapata was on, who, of course, has been playing Cruz Castillo's mother. And then today, just before recording, we watched A Policewoman, and Henry Darrow was on, Cruz Castillo's father, with Fernando Lamas. Lorenzo Lamas' father, who we've been seeing on our Friday night Falcon Crest viewings. So a lot of Santa Barbara people just in these couple days. This week I'm wearing my Nantucket Nectar shirt, which I don't know if I've told this story before, but when I was on a business trip in Boston, I tried sampling a Nantucket Nectar, and as I drained the jar, a shard of glass entered my mouth that had been sitting on the bottom of the jar, and I sent in the jar and the glass shard to the Nantucket Nectars people, and they were kind enough to send me this lovely t-shirt. So if you have a near-death experience in the U.S., you too could have a windfall like this. And now, back to our story. Minx shoots Cece. Were you expecting that Cece would get hit by the bullet, or were you thinking it would miss him, or what had you expected?
I thought that it might miss him, and Lionel come running down, and Cece getting really, really upset and threatening to, sue the entire family or something like that. I didn't think it would actually hit him, but I was rather gratified that it did.
Lionel, Brick, and Augusta all come running, and Cece is helped to his feet. And they went a slightly comedic route with it. There is buckshot in his derriere, so he will not be sitting down for quite some time. Cece then rescinds his offer to let Minx stay at the mansion, and she says, "I'd rather sleep on a bench in the park than have you for a landlord." So, nice little line by Minx. Lionel tells Cece they'll be gone in 10 minutes. And he says, "I'm just loading my last suitcase." And Cece says, "Make sure you load her, too." Brick is the one who ends up taking Cece home. And Lionel then tells Minx that someday they'll own the house again. Warren shows up just around this time as well. Brick then returns, and Minx thinks that Cece has sent him. And he tells her that the way she feels now is the way he felt when he found out that he was Channing. They are trying to figure out where to sleep, and Lionel suggests they could sleep on the boat, and Minx says she'd rather sleep in the car. And it's too late for a hotel. Lionel suggests just dropping in on the Abercrombies, but Augusta says, just drop in on the Abercrombies. And so, in the end, Brick invites Minx to stay with him. So that was a really nice, resolution to the Brick is angry with Minx arc, which was from New Year's Eve. So January, February, March, 4 months, I guess.
Yeah, that was, I think I mentioned after we watched this episode that there were 2 scenes in it that I really enjoyed, and that was definitely one of them, where Brick brings Minx into his home, and she tells him that that's the sort of the best thing that could ever happen to her. She's so happy. And so we can just imagine, we don't actually see it, but we can just imagine her coming back to the Perkins house and living there happily, bonding with him and Amy and the baby.
I would like to say I expect to see a whole lot of scenes of that, but I think I looked ahead, and Minx only ever shows up for a day or two every couple months for the rest of her time on the show. So not going to be as satisfying, I think, as we have in our heads. Lionel and Augusta finally leave the house an hour later, and Augusta says, "Julia's in San Francisco, so you can sleep on my couch." So she is living with Julia. I guess they're not at the Capwell house, but it's still not clear where their apartment is. It kind of looks like the Capwell hotel a little bit anyway, but definitely haven't seen Breeze, though, since the move. As they get ready for bed and contemplate a nightcap, Augusta contemplates locking the door to her bedroom. She goes back and forth a few times, and she finally decides to leave it unlocked and opens the door, and Lionel is standing there, and they end up passionately kissing.
So, in a way, this actually works out quite well for at least several members of the Lockridge family. Certainly, Minx and Lionel and Augusta, in some ways, perhaps end up in a better place than they were at the beginning of the episode.
Warren is, unfortunately, not in a good place. Kirk sees Cruz and Eden beneath his window. Eden says that they have to pretend they're trying to keep their affair a secret so that it doesn't look like a fake affair to Kirk. Cruz is worried that Kirk might smell a trap. Cruz leaves to investigate the gunshot heard at the Lockridge house. We never actually see him arrive there, though. Kirk knocks over a lamp as he rushes back to bed, and Eden rushes upstairs at the sound. Kirk is in bed, pretending to be asleep, and when he wakes up, he pretends he has no idea how the lamp fell. But he does ask Eden where she was, and she says, "Oh, I was working at the Orient Express." Mary tells Eden the real name of the night nurse, and Eden realizes, uh-oh, Kirk knew the whole time I was talking to Cruz. Eden tells Cruz that she knows this, And she says, she does this by phone, and then she says, they need to enact their plan now. And she will get Kirk to follow her to the Capwell Cabana. So this is the first we've heard of the Capwell Cabana. We've had the gazebo for many years and the boathouse for a few weeks, but now we have a cabana. And also there's a cabin in the woods we got earlier this year. So.
Which blew up.
It did blow up, yeah. So we're getting to learn some of the more, the Capwell holiday locales a little bit more.
And, well, I guess, from what has transpired in the conversations that Cece and Lionel have, apparently he will also be getting Lionel's vineyards in France, his various holdings in South America. So there's all sorts of potential places where we could see different Capwell family scenes in the future.
Maybe he'll sell some of them off to Grant or something. Mason has been doing research for David's case in Cece's library. He's there for most of the episodes. Cece keeps telling him, I thought I told you to leave. He's surprised that Mark lets Mary work the night shift. At one point, Mary fantasizes about kissing Mason. And then she has a discussion with Mason and says that she wishes she had more experience with relationships. But as Mason tries to press her as to exactly how this relates to her marriage, she says she can't really explain any more to Mason. So, kind of leaves Mason frustrated. Cece is brought in by Brick, and Mason manages to get in a few jokes about an old lady taking down Cece Capwell. Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your rears, he says at one point. Cece asks Brick to have Meeks arrested. Brick refuses, saying she had plenty of provocation. Cece says, I assume you're not interested in your job anymore, and Brick says, well, I quit. This is, of course, when Brick heads back to the Lockridges briefly. Mark is called in to remove the buckshot. Cece spies on the Lockridge house with binoculars, complaining that Lionel is an hour late when he finally sees the lights going off. Eden tells Cece she used to admire how uncompromising he was, but not anymore. So, as we thought, he's kind of lost Eden on this stealing everything from the Lockridge's gambit.
Yeah, that was my other favorite scene in this episode, is that Eden just really lets him have it in I think, a very sincere and certainly very impactful way. So you can see that at the end of this scene, this has had a bit of an effect on Cece.
Cece calls Brick back over and asks him to continue working at the casino. So it's interesting that he was sort of bluffing when he threatened to fire Brick, and as we know from Brick, he's certainly not going to fall for anything like that. Brick tells him there's not one member of Cece's family behind him on this. And Brick says, what I want from my child is their love and respect. How long has it been since you've been able to say that? And it's not entirely clear if Brick takes the job back. He seems to say no for most of it, the discussion. So we will see if Brick actually does take it. Gina sneaks in to see Kirk and asks for more money to look for a new place. He says there's not much money left in his account, and Gina says, well, it would be a shame if I had to play that tape. And he tells her to stop threatening him with that tape constantly. He suggests she stay in the empty Lockridge house. He also wants Gina to find him a unique piece of jewelry, and a jeweler willing to swear he was with Kirk the night of the shooting, to designing it for Eden. So, this is an interesting part. Everyone's getting their alibis in place. So, is it possible they'll pull one over on Cruz Castillo and he will, both he and Gina will come out scot-free?
Made me wonder what kind of jewelry he's going to have created for Eden. Is it going to be like one of the Borgia rings with, cyanide in it or something?
Well, it's interesting that he's letting Gina take care of all that, because it's kind of going to be a wild card. Kirk tells Gina to flash the lights when he gets over to the Luckridges, and she does that. When she gets there, I don't know if anyone notices it. Cruz arrives at the cabana and tells Eden that they need to do this right, to have a decoy that can switch out with Eden at the last minute so that she'll be protected. Eden says, this cabana really would be a good place for someone to actually have an affair, wouldn't it? Cruz seems a bit taken aback by that, wonders if that's what she is suggesting. When Kirk fails to follow them there, though, they eventually head back to the house. And Cruz gives Eden a pager to use in an emergency, so that might come into play at some point.
I'm sure Santana wouldn't mind having a pager for Cruz.
We haven't seen her for a while. I haven't seen Brandon for a while either. She enters the house to find Kirk standing at the top of the stairs. So, well, the good news is next time she tries to get him to follow her, he'll be up and around and able to do so. So, we will see. I think, it sounds like this might be a good plan, and we'll see what Kirk actually does if he does follow them to the cabana. And that is it for the events of this episode. I'm now back living in Kelowna, looking for work. Probably not looking for work between 2 and 3 p.m. on weekdays. But I've probably, if I know me, I said, I'll start looking in May. And it's still only April 28th, so I've got a few days. You're still writing finals.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the first year we had.
Still May, so not even finals.
These big provincial finals that I guess I was probably writing them in May or early June. So.
Mm-hmm. And I will return to Vancouver at least once. Actually, you know what? I think I kept going back for the monthly Time Meddlers of Vancouver meetings, but I definitely will go back for my Bob Newhart concert at some point and spend a very long day at Expo 86, which we will talk more about on the launch day, which I can't remember, but I think it's coming very soon. So we will be back for the Tuesday episode 446. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your rear.
Welcome back to the world's most favorite Santa Barbara podcast. It's Tuesday, April 29th, 1986. Chernobyl radiation keeps drifting across Europe. Lionel and Augusta spend the night together, and we say goodbye to another original cast member forever. It's episode 446 of Santa Barbara. And before we talk about that, we finally tracked down an episode of Police Story that we had not seen in the syndicated reruns. We had to get the Season 2 discs from the library. We saw the return of Joe Forrester, which was a backdoor pilot for a series, and Janice Page, future Minx Lockridge, was in that. Augusta and Lionel wake up on the floor of Augusta's apartment, and Lionel wants to send flowers to Julia for being out of town. They both agree it was a lovely night, but Augusta gets a little annoyed when Lionel tries to borrow money from her. That was actually nice to see them back together, and it seems like they, they didn't really end things badly, so this might be a recurring thing. Although I think he asks if she wants to get married again, and she says no.
Yeah.
Eden tries to get some clothes without waking up Kirk, but he jumps out of bed and tries to make love to her. She tells him she doesn't want to stress his new heart, and she asks him to have Rosa clean her clothes from yesterday. Kirk picks up her shoes and finds beach sand planted by Eden. Eden watches from the hallway, thinking, ooh, this plan might just work. Kirk tells Haley that he's found Gina's tape. I didn't buy it right from the beginning. I thought that's a fake tape. Kirk says she didn't hide it very well. Haley runs off to the Lockridge house to tell Gina, and Gina realizes immediately what Kirk is trying to do, trying to trick her into retrieving the tape, and decides to turn the tables on him. So Gina pretends to go out and get the tape from its hiding place, and then returns with a fake tape. Kirk shows up at the Lockridge house with a gun, and Gina says, "Oh, you're strong enough to get all the way down here by yourself. What else can you do?" she says flirtily. And he says, "Oh, perhaps you should have been Cece's mistress instead of his wife." She says, "Would it surprise you if I was Mrs. Cece Capwell again?" So Gina clearly has plans of somehow getting back into the Capwell house and marrying Cece. What do you think? Will she do it?
I think she'll need some kind of leverage to do that. It'll be interesting to see where she gets it.
And kind of remember where she gets it. This is a really interesting turn of events that occurs in a few weeks. We'll see if there is another wedding between Cece and Gina at some point.
And we'll see if Cece looks as happy at his new wedding as Cruz looked at his wedding.
Well, I think if it's the one I remember, there's a very intriguing twist that I don't think you can see coming. Kirk forces her to give him the tape. She plays as if she is frightened and hands it over. But she manages to get him to confess to some new things while he's there. And of course, as we suspect, she has recorded the new confessions. When he returns home, he plays the tape only to find it's music. And Gina phones him up right away and plays for him the new tape. Now, the one thing that I thought odd, since Gina was so concerned about how the first tape sort of implicated her, is that on the new tape she clearly says, "The night you and I tried to kill Eden," which once again implicates her. So,
the thing that I found sort of odd about this, and I think I mentioned it to you, was that I'm sure the technology existed back in 1986 to copy a tape. So having one tape probably shouldn't mean that much.
Yeah, exactly. Gina could have 10 copies. Santana asks Cruz why he has to work so late on this new assignment. Cruz pops over to see Eden and tells her, she tells him that she will write him a note to meet her at the cabana, which they can arrange for Kirk to find. Cruz says the decoy will be waiting in Eden's car when that happens. Ted comes into the cabana and is surprised to find them there. Kirk surprises Eden by telling her that he walked the entire property line, including the Lockridge estate. He also reveals that he checked with the Orient Express, and no one has seen her there for 2 days, no one's called in sick, and there's no flu epidemic. So all the lies she's been telling him for the last few days. So he wants to know why she's lying to him. Oh, he also touches her to confirm she is not hot, and therefore can sleep in their bedroom. He wants to know why she's been lying, and she reiterates that she's worried about his new heart. That's really all she could say. He says tonight he'll prove to her that he's a new man. So Eden rushes to the casino to interrupt Cruz and Santana's lunch. Eden says it has to be now, but Cruz says the decoy and lookout aren't ready. Santana tells Eden to leave Cruz alone for Brandon's sake. You have so much. Let me keep what I've got.
And yes, as we predicted, this whole thing is not going to go over very well with Santana at all. And Cruz, interestingly enough, even though he's been kind of following Eden around like a little dog, he's not really that happy to see her at this event. You know?
I think he's trying to have a nice lunch with Santana.
Yeah, and he knows what he's going to be dealing with on the home front if Santana is suspicious. So that's the flip side for Cruz. Yes, maybe Eden can get out of her marriage to Kirk or manage to get him implicated in all of these things he's been doing, but it's going to make Cruz's married life very difficult. Not that I think Eden necessarily minds that. She's got a little kind of smirk on her face when Santana comes storming over.
She thinks Cruz is going to leave Santana immediately once they do away with Kirk, and I have a feeling she may be a little surprised that he is willing to stick it out with Santana and Brand.
I'm actually kind of hoping so, because I think that would make things a little more interesting for me. There's that tension there.
Ted takes Haley surfing, and they make out in the cabana. I think it's during the workday, because she's in her maid outfit. Seems like they're gone for a long time.
On a break, I guess.
Yeah, a long break. Just say, I hope Mr. Capwell doesn't get angry with me for being gone so long. And there's only one towel in the cabana, which Ted has to use to dry her off. But she says, I'm going to stock up on towels, now that I know this place exists. Eden and Sophia discuss Cece's injury and what he did to the Lockridges. And Sophia says she's letting go of the dream of getting back with Cece and will no longer be coming to the mansion. She would like Kelly and Ted and Eden to visit her at her home. She then, after Eden leaves, Sophia finds a lump in her breasts, but can't bring herself to make an appointment with the doctor. So this looks like a new storyline for Sophia.
Yes, definitely, and we'll see who she confides in and who, I'm assuming someone at some point will persuade her to go and get medical advice on this, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
At the casino. Everyone's hanging out at the casino today. Warren? If I were Warren, I'd never have gone down to the casino. I'm shocked. But Warren thanks Brick for standing up to him. Warren thanks Brick for standing up for him. And then starts playing roulette once Brick has left the room, which is just a shocker. Sophia shows up and is horrified to find Warren gambling. When Brick realizes what's going on, he forces Warren to cash out his chips. Warren keeps protesting, but I'm winning. It's so much different than before. But between Sophia and Brick, I think they convince him that he's got a problem, and Brick urges him to check himself into a treatment facility. And he recommends one upstate that his father went to. Not a shocker that Barnaby Wallace was a gambling addict. Although Brick was playing the horses that one time, so he must have inherited that from his dad. Brick and Warren visit Augusta to tell her the news that Warren is leaving town and has decided to go to rehab. And they won't be allowed to visit him for a few months until he's settled in. At the empty Lockridge house, I guess they still have keys. Warren is standing there with his suitcase in hand. Presumably he brought that with him, but he wanted to say goodbye to the house. And Lionel is there with him. And Warren tells Lionel he'll miss this place, and Lionel says, people have lost everything and come back stronger than ever. And he kind of likens, that a little bit to Warren going off to rehab and coming back stronger than ever. As they walk out the door, Warren urges him to patch things up with Augusta. And that is it for John Allen Nelson as Warren Lockridge. One of our favorites, I think, and we think underutilized. Several times when his storyline showed promise, like the one with Maggie or the one with the newspaper, and it just didn't materialize.
But it was a really nice send-off. I really enjoyed his scenes with Brick and Sophia, and a very touching scene with Augusta. It was nice to see the two brothers make up at the end. I did think that Gina must have been quite skillful at stashing her things away, since they didn't seem to notice any sign of someone else living in the house.
She was sleeping on the floor of the living room when Haley burst in that one scene.
Yeah, but it was a nice send off, and it is a shame to see the actor who actually resembled Lionel so much heading off, hopefully for greener pastures and better storylines, but it does give them a chance to recalibrate the character, who I assume will be coming back from rehab eventually, and maybe give that character a bit more to do.
It seems, at the time we didn't know that we wouldn't be seeing him for a while, and once we realized it, it was like, are the Lockridges dwindling away like the Andrades and the Perkinses?
The other thing that struck me about this scene, I think Brick mentions that he's got to pack up his things, so it definitely made it sound to me like he was not planning to stay on at the casino.
Well, that's true. Brick said he was there to pack up his things, and when he told Warren to cash it in, Warren said to him, "You don't even work here anymore." So yeah, he had gone ahead and quit, yesterday, and I guess he followed through with that. So I think Sam has finally moved his way up to the top in the casino.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Rembrandt on sliders. After 3 seasons, he moved from the bottom of the credits to the top as all of the higher ranking stars slowly left the show.
And it's funny because a few weeks back I was so convinced that we'd seen Sam's last episode, and I think he said he was moving on to other things, but
he was in this episode.
He was in this episode. So
really the only one there that we know. Augusta presumably still works there. But presumably things are now all in place for Cece to pull whatever he's planning to pull with the casino. So, that may not be a set that we see for too long, depending on what Cece's plan is. And of course, there's still the faulty wiring that we suspect could come into play. So, when Kirk is back in Eden's bedroom, he plays the tape only to find that it is music. And Gina phones him to let him know that she has the real tape and also this new tape, which she plays for him. After he gets off the phone, Kirk clutches his chest and falls to the ground.
one thing I should mention I did enjoy about this whole thing with Gina and Kirk and the little tape is the music she ends up putting on the tape, which is this sort of bouncy music, and it in itself is mocking Kirk.
Yeah. All right, sad day for the Lockridges and for Santa Barbara fans, even though we wouldn't know it for sure until, sometime down the road. But it is now the end of April, and Wednesday, April 30th will be the next episode. So we will see you after we've watched episode 447. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 447 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Wednesday, April 30th, 1986. Hey, we're at the end of April. That means the May sweeps are probably already started on Monday. So people should start getting murdered.
Well, we're expecting some kind of big things to happen. We already saw a murder outside of the May sweeps. So what on earth will they be doing during the sweeps?
Oh, maybe the trial.
Yeah, could be a trial.
Mason versus Julia. Nick tells Pearl he doesn't want to put pressure on Kelly. Pearl actually said, "Oh, just tell her you want to be her friend," which is exactly what Nick already tried, and Kelly said she didn't want. So Dylan comes in. They're all in buzzes, by the way, and whispers something in Nick's ear that causes Nick to leap up and lunge at him. David steps in to stop the fight, and Dylan says, "I don't have to take this from a wife killer."
He's very free with, insulting other people's reputation. We remember he did this way back in the day with Brick and how he felt that he was too high and mighty to hire Brick for the casino initially. So he's very, very quick to point out possible failings in other people's reputations. And he, of course, is pretty much the dregs reputation-wise.
He basically spends this episode being annoying. Kelly arranges a surprise birthday party for Sophia with the help of Justin and Courtney. They go to Buzz's to pick up the food. Buzz does catering now, I guess, for parties.
Yeah,
so,
he's expanded a little bit.
Yeah. And runs into Dylan, who's nursing a shiner. So I guess Nick managed to clock him at some point. Kelly tries to avoid Dylan, but of course Dylan homes right in on her. Pearl hands Courtney several bags of food, like big paper bags. It's funny seeing paper bags in use because this entire cycle of plastic bags is now come and now gone since Santa Barbara was on the air. Pearl asks Courtney if she has remembered to bring a surf to help her carry all the bags. She says, it's only a block away. So this is interesting. I mean, we knew Kelly was on the waterfront from when she got her new apartment. And Buzz, of course, is on the waterfront. So it's interesting she's only a block away from Buzz's. So don't really want to try and map this to a real Santa Barbara map, because probably these waterfronts are not quite as dodgy in real life as they seem on the show. I'll just remember there being a yacht club.
My memory of being in Santa Barbara was a very long public beach and a pier.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure there's a lot more coastline, north of that point, because that's where you kind of come into Santa Barbara if you're coming up from Los Angeles.
Well, we know the beach is only 20 minutes away from the Capwell house from previous episodes. So Pearl offers to help carry it. So he's kind of softening to her, even though she had outed his real identity. Courtney notes that Buzz hired Pearl back, because, he had been fired a few days ago based on Dylan's recommendation.
Well, I think we can safely assume that Dylan doesn't quite have the pull anymore that he may have had when he was playing a big sort of swinger at the casino.
Mm-hmm. And then Pearl says that he's just working there on his days off. And Courtney realizes, wait, you're back as the butler too? He goes, yep. So I guess now that everyone thinks David's the killer, Pearl's got his butler job back.
It's kind of funny, they're actually holding the latter part of this conversation while they're trying to manage these huge grocery bags as well.
Mm-hmm. At Kelly's, Pearl shows Courtney how to fold napkins. But during the course of their banter, she brings up his real name, teasingly. Not really within earshot of the other partygoers, but he is not too happy with that and storms out. Into the bathroom! When Courtney knocks on the door, he ends up forgiving her, I think, for everything. Nick tells Justin he wants Justin to help Kelly secretly, since he is a psychiatrist. But Justin says he's still got a month to go on his residency, and anyway, it isn't ethical to treat someone as a psychiatrist without telling them. Kelly is annoyed to find Nick in her place, but more annoyed that Dylan followed her from Buzz's. Sophia tells Mary she found a lump, and she convinces Sophia to let Mark examine her. So that happens at the hospital, not in the Capwell guest house. At the hospital, Sophia runs into Dylan, and tells him to leave Kelly alone. And Dylan says, no wonder she is how he is. You're mothering her, and CC's worse. You and the rest of your rotten family have poisoned her mind against me. This is just a way to add Sophia to the list of suspects. Nick arrives to shut Dylan up and apologizes to Sophia for Dylan's existence. As you may recall from yesterday's cliffhanger, Kirk Cranston had collapsed. Kaylee finds him unconscious in Eden's room, and he is rushed to the hospital. The next time we see him, he's yelling into the phone at Gina. To find Eden, the doctor reveals that Kirk merely fainted. The nurse mentions to Kirk that everyone's talking about him. It's not every day a man receives a woman's heart.
This is like very unprofessional nursing behavior.
Well, it was the 80s. People were smoking in the hospital thing still, so... Kirk, of course, snaps back at her on that. Says, they're all the same. Well, they're smaller. Kirk then has a dream that Madeline is his nurse. And then Madeline says, I'm part of you now, Kirk. You're only half a man. And Cruz is the kind of man a woman dreams of. And then she threatens to take back her heart. Kirk wakes up and shouts, there's nothing wrong with me. I will not go mad. Now, this is kind of solidifies a whole bunch of stuff that I kind of had in the back of my head of Kirk. For some reason, I was remembering it as Kirk had a split personality, but now that I see Madeline in his dream taunting him, I think that's probably what I'm thinking of, that he has his female side is Madeline, taunting him about it. So I don't know if that will actually. I assume every time we see Madeline from now on, she'll show up in a flashback of David's and then show up in a dream of Kirk's. Yeah, I don't know if it will turn into a full-blown split personality for Kirk, but that would be a fun.
Yeah, we were trying to think about how Madeline would still be appearing in the show, and this seems like a really viable way that she'll maybe kind of be a voice in Kirk's head, at least.
Now, will it turn into the way it seems to be with Kelly, where he doesn't need to be asleep to have Madeline taunting him, and she'll be like the great Gazoo next to him, making snide comments? That's what I'm hoping for, and I kind of, in the back of my head, think, there's some more scenes of her taunting him, but whether they were dreams or hallucinations,
Maybe
I can't remember after all these years.
If he's talking to other characters, she'll kind of appear behind the character, and he'll start talking to her instead of whoever he's supposed to be having a conversation with.
Cece arrives, and Kirk complains to him that he can't find Eden. She's so unfeeling sometimes. Cece says he's not giving her the credit she deserves. And when he leaves, Kirk says, no one criticizes his precious little Eden. Cece's actually been in and out all day, and, it was the doctor telling Cece at one point that Kirk's merely fainted. Mary talks to Mother Isabel about getting an annulment. And Mother Isabel seems to be really on board with him getting an annulment. Later, Mark tells Mary that he spotted her looking at the pregnant women at the hospital, and he's talked to a friend of his, and he's come up with a perfect plan. They should adopt a baby. So this kind of subverts Mary's annulment plans. Yeah, and actually this could drag things out a little bit too, because she might think, well, let's go along with this baby thing, and that might drag things on for a few months before she realizes that's not going to solve their problems.
Yeah, it might take some more nefarious behavior on Mark's part as well, so maybe we'll see a bit more of that during sweeps too.
Julia and David meet at Buzz's, and she suggests at one point moving back to her place, because what she's going to ask him next, probably he doesn't want to hear in public. First he says, oh, you can ask me anything, but then when she starts, he decides, yeah, let's go to your place. She asks about Madeline and David's relationship, and that's where we get our first flashback that has Madeline and David in it. And, well, actually, we had one last time of him finding her, but, that wasn't really a conversation with Madeline, I would say. But this one, Madeline asks David for a divorce, which we've only ever heard David just, talking about. And then Madeline accuses David of having an affair. And he says that she's the one who just picks up and goes around the world. And then she says, your free ride is just about over. So as he's, this flashback, obviously he's relating this to Julia. And Julia says, Julia asks him, well, did you have an affair? And he says, nope, I've never had an affair. And then Julia accuses him of killing Madeline for the money. Of course, we knew right away this is an old lawyer's trick to see how he'll react on the witness stand. And he fails that test, as they always do in these shows. He jumps up angrily, but she says he'll have to control his outbursts once he's being questioned by Mason. David also goes on to say that he had his own business. But then after some prompting by Julia, reveals that Madeline gave him a loan, and that he did file for bankruptcy. So what started out as a positive thing ended up being a negative for him. So he says that he found out that Madeline had several affairs. It's interesting, David is constantly lying about everything, and then later revealing things. Like at first he said he didn't know Madeline had an affair. Then he revealed he knew she had one. Now he knew she had multiple ones.
Well, and he's done this since the beginning. I mean, this is what got him into hot water to begin with, when he swore up and down he hadn't been in Santa Barbara. And of course he had, and then, that he said, oh, he hadn't been near the hotel. And of course Cruz found the bloody shirt. So he just keeps doing this and doing this and doing this, and somehow doesn't seem to learn any new strategies.
Well, guess what? He now reveals that he did have an affair himself.
That's right.
But he says he didn't smoke either time in the bungalow, so there's no way that found cigarette could be his. And Julia says, well, it was very distinctive. What do you want to bet that in a few episodes? Well, I did have a cigarette. I mean, a completely pointless thing to lie about.
I'm actually starting to think that Mason was quite smart in goading Julia to take David's case, because he's really, really incriminating himself. Like, he's turning into the nightmare client for Julia. And I think this is a way, perhaps, of Mason. Maybe he sees Julia as competition. Who knows? But in some ways it kind of diffuses whatever power she has. And he already knows she's triggered from whatever happened before in Phoenix. So.
Well, once David's out of the room, Julia calls someone and asks them to do a full investigation on David Laurent. So, they'll find out that he was probably smoking in that bungalow, among other things. Yeah, what else will we find out? Ted, Haley, Justin, Kelly, Courtney, and Pearl will await Sophia at the surprise party. Now, during this episode, Kelly spent I think she was actually on the phone with Eden at some point, although he was not in this episode, trying to coordinate exactly when she should invite Sophia over, but not tell her it's a surprise party. And eventually she does, and the doorbell goes, and everyone's ready, and it's Cece unexpectedly showing up at Kelly's. And he sees everyone and is kind of angry that they're all cutting him out. And they say, well, it's because you threw the Lockridges off their property.
Yeah, it's funny because Cece's kind of moping around this whole episode because he knows that, there's going to be a party and they're celebrating Sophia's birthday and he hasn't been invited, even though he's thrown Sophia out of the house and behaved terribly towards the Lockridges against everyone's advice. So, yeah, he finally just shows up uninvited, crashes the party.
He leaves when asked, and of course, as he opens the door, Sophia is arriving, but he basically doesn't say anything, he just walks out. Next thing you know, the party's over, and Courtney gives Pearl a ride back to Buzz's, and Kelly and Sophia gossip about Ted and Haley. It's kind of fun, and very, realistic dialogue. Kelly tells Sophia that Dylan's obsessed with running away with her. And Sophia suggests a psychologist, and Kelly says, I feel as if I've always got to be ready. Sophia says, ready for what? That's an interesting thing, an interesting look into Kelly's state of mind. Kelly gives Sophia a dress as a gift, and Sophia contemplates whether or not she'll be able to wear it properly if she has to have surgery. After the party, Kelly falls asleep, and she dreams of Dylan in a red turtleneck. And he turns into Peter in a red turtleneck. So we get to see Peter again. Yay. Peter grabs her throat, and she stabs him in the leg somehow. I guess she has something in her hand. And then he turns back into Dylan, who's on the floor with a knife in him, saying, I don't want to hurt you, Kelly. Why do you want to kill me?
Well, I think fair enough. Probably by the time Sweeps arrive, most of the characters in this will want to kill Dylan. So I'm not sure that's really such a difficult question. But definitely I feel like we are coming to something regarding Dylan and a knife. It's
interesting that Dream Dylan is putting this idea into Kelly's head to kill him now. So that's actually an interesting twist there. So left that best for last there. And yeah, it's the end of April. It's midweek. I probably decided not to look for work till next week. So tomorrow's Thursday, May 1st. Probably be watching Knots Landing. And we will be back after we watch episode 448. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 448 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Thursday, May the 1st, 1986. May is upon us. Pearl does card tricks for Haley. Well, they are careful not to disturb Ted, who is working on his papers. So his semester is winding up, presumably.
Mm-hmm.
And he'll have time for some Santa Barbara teen scene summertime fun time.
Hopefully it'll be a bit more fun than last summer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll see what summer has in store for Ted, and presumably, I want to say Rafe. That's not his name.
Danny?
Danny. And Haley, and any other new teens that may show up. I think Courtney's probably a bit old to be a teen. She'll be just hanging out with Pearl, probably. Ted and Pearl have a bet over who made a famous quote, and Pearl wins, much to Ted's surprise. So he must have read a lot more than you led us to believe.
Little does he know.
Now Haley and Ted are trying to figure out a way to spend some time together, but Ted has so many papers to type up, and Haley says, well, why don't I type one of them up for you? And so she says, I can do it over in the empty Lockridge house, where it'll be quiet. But of course she'll need someone to serve dinner for her, and Pearl agrees to do it. Courtney brings Pearl a tray of food and says, you can consider this an apology. And Pearl asks her to put pepper on his mousse and accepts her apology.
I'm assuming that that's maybe a high-class thing to do.
I don't know. He was getting her to put pepper on his various pieces of his meal. So I just thought that was a hilarious thing to do. Mason says Courtney will be a good witness against David. Courtney says she last saw him in New York the last weekend in February. I don't see how that can really be relevant, but maybe there's something to that. Julia asks Courtney about the person she saw that day before the murder that she thought was David, and she confirms that she didn't actually see his face. So
intriguing.
Maybe she just saw a familiar-looking raincoat. Julia also says the cigarette she saw is sold in 4 different stores in Santa Barbara. And Julia points out that Courtney never saw anything less than a harmonious relationship between David and Madeline. Mm-hmm. And Courtney admits that she may be a bit biased because she was freaked out by the murder. Julia asks Courtney if her parents approved of David, but Pearl arrives just at that time and says she might be projecting her own feelings. Pearl basically interrupts this whole attempt to, get info from Courtney, and Julia ends up leaving without really finishing her questioning, which, seems a bit stupid, since David going to jail would be a good thing for Pearl. He shouldn't try to mess up the trial.
I also feel, as I think we've discussed before, that all of these procedures would go a lot more smoothly if they were done in a proper office.
Right, not in various gazebos and wicker tables and casinos. Julia says, I'd ask these same questions if I were defending Pearl, and Pearl says, well, but you didn't take my case, did you? David tells Julia he wishes she hadn't talked to Courtney. Julia says that Mason is already using Courtney against him, so he tells her that he started having an affair around Christmas time, 1983, with a widowed Capwell friend. A few months later, the woman wanted him to divorce Madeline, so he broke it off. Then later, Nick arrives with some info for Julia. It's the name of David's mistress, Cassandra Dunn. And she happens to be in L.A. and has agreed to pop up to speak with Julia. Tina Louise arrives as Cassandra Dunn. So we have a second Gilligan's Island alumnus showing up as a character on Santa Barbara. And I noticed that she smokes. I don't know if they're the fancy cigarettes David does, but it's interesting. They'd have a character smoking. But then again, it was 1985, so. She says that David was lying and that he wanted to marry her because she had inherited a lot of money. She runs into David on the way out, and David kind of scowls at Julia for secretly seeing Cassandra without mentioning it to him.
Mm-hmm.
Later, Julia says to him, "You neglected to tell me Cassie is so much older than you." I don't know if Tina Louise had seen the entire script when she agreed to do the part. David says, "You make it sound like I was a gigolo. She was hurt when I ended the affair, so of course she made out to be the one who did the rejecting." Julia says she believes that he's an honest man. Later, Cassandra Dunn returns and tells Julia that she made everything up. David never wanted to marry her. He loved Madeline. Julia asks if she talked to David after they ran into each other. She says yes, they did. They talked about old times. Julia seems suspicious. What do you think? Do you think David ran into her and told her to change her story?
That was the first thing that crossed my mind, is that David threatened her in some way and got her to change her story, because it did seem like a very abrupt about-face, and she seemed to be, I thought, a bit more convincing the second time, or the first time around. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, as with everything, David always lies the first time through, so
Yeah.
it's quite possible that threatens her in this Steve Bassett style.
Yeah, and I mean, we've already talked about him not wanting Julia to talk to Courtney, and there is one interpretation that he's maybe got tender feelings towards Courtney and wants to protect her, but maybe he's afraid of what she might tell Julia as well.
Mm-hmm.
So with David, there's always certain avenues that this can go, and it's not always the first one that he presents.
Mm-hmm. And so I think with Cassandra being in L.A., we now have a potential second suspect for the murder, because maybe she does want David.
Yeah, that's the other thing, too.
Mason invites Mary to go riding. By the time she finally decides to take him up on his offer, he's already gone out for a ride, and she falls asleep on a haystack and fantasizes about making love with Mason. Mason returns from his ride, and they have a bit of a close conversation. Gina tells Kirk the jewelry is ready. Kirk tells Haley she must have been relieved when she found him on the floor and thought he had died. He tells her to push the twin beds together. And he says he's going for a walk if anyone wants him. She says she doubts anyone will want him. Kirk yells, "You're on thin ice!" I don't think Haley necessarily likes Kirk. When Kirk arrives at the Lockridges, Gina's doing aerobics, and he asks if she's doing the dead woman's workout. I guess workout tapes were all the rage back in '85, and hey, maybe this could be a money-making scheme for Gina.
Mm-hmm.
Gina says she's using newspapers for a pillow, living like a bag lady, and she asks him to at least bring her some bedding, and he says he'll think about it. She gives him the jewelry, which is this huge, chunky necklace, and she says it was $20,000, but the jeweler also wants another $5,000 to keep quiet, which Kirk seems to now suddenly be able to come up with after all this time of saying he has no money. After Kirk leaves, she calls the jeweler and tells him he'll get his $12,000. So Gina has made a $13,000 profit on this deal. And I don't think anyone is upset to see Gina cheating Kirk.
No.
Haley arrives with Ted's papers and says she's a bad typist and asks Gina to do it for her. Gina sits down and says, "Let me show you how it's done."
This is a nice callback to the fact that Gina started out as a secretary,
Mm-hmm.
a very, very good secretary as far as we know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how she met Stockwell. And we have heard her talk about those skills in the past, and I think we've actually seen her use them a little bit too. So this is nice to see.
If she ever comes back to life, she could theoretically get a job doing that.
Mm-hmm.
She could work as Julia's secretary. I don't know if they've ever had any scenes together, if there's any acrimony between them. Don't know how that typewriter popped up there. It seems like it was just suddenly there. Don't know if the Lockridge just left it behind. It's certainly not the Capwell typewriter, because that's in police custody. Kirk tells Eden that no one could find her last night while he was in the hospital. And she says she had to go to Santa Ynez to look at that property that they're buying. Cruz calls and hangs up when Kirk answers. This is all part of their plan, though, because Eden then calls him back immediately, pretending to call her secretary. And Cruz asks her if Kirk is buying it. She says yes. He tells her to go to the garage at 7:40 and change places with the decoy there and hide on the vacant Lockridge estate. So I thought, oh, Eden is going to discover Gina. Kirk calls Eden's secretary, Jan, and confirms that Eden has nothing on her calendar. So Eden's lied to him about being busy tonight. Eden listens at the door and smiles, because that's all part of the plan. Cruz tells Nick he hopes Kirk breaks the door down, so he'll finally be able to nab him for something. Nick is the one who is going to act as the lookout tonight. I'm surprised he had a heart attack, says Cruz. I didn't think he had one. A common joke amongst the characters of the show. The decoy arrives in a blonde wig, and of course, a similar dress to what Eden has. She will wait in the parking lot and switch places when Eden comes for the car. But Kirk gives Eden the jewelry, and I'm thinking, uh-oh, that might be a problem with, identifying which one's Eden and which one's the decoy. Mm-hmm. He asks her to wear it tonight. Eden finds out from Pearl that Kirk has already asked Pearl to pull the car around, so it's actually not in the garage, it's out in the driveway, which kind of messes up the secretiveness that they were planning. And then when she gets there, the decoy is hiding in the back seat and says, don't do anything suspicious. Kirk is in the car behind us. So the decoy says you either got to lose him or drive to the office, which is what you told him you were doing, because otherwise it'll be too dangerous. Eden decides to go to the cabana anyway. And she enters the cabana, and Cruz is annoyed that it's her and not the decoy. Nick radios that Kirk is coming down the driveway. What will happen? Will Kirk try to kill Cruz and Eden and finally get arrested?
One of my favorite scenes that are aspects of the scene between Eden and Kirk is that after he presents her with the jewelry and then he leaves, she snatches it off.
Yeah. So, but I think she was wearing it, though, in the car, wasn't she? I think so. I don't know.
I don't remember.
I guess since she never switched places with the decoy, it doesn't much matter. So no risk of her discovering Gina on the estate, Lockridge estate, since that's all gone awry. This is actually a fun thing that always happens on Santa Barbara. The plans are made, we find out what the plans are, and then they always go awry. So that's kind of fun. It adds some excitement to the things. I don't remember really what happened. I would have seen this episode and the next one. I would think I wouldn't have had a job yet. So don't remember anything. So it'll be all new again to me. Maybe something will come to me, or maybe it'll be a damp squib and nothing exciting is actually going to happen. But it is May sweeps, and a Friday episode tomorrow. So I'm hoping something exciting happens, and we will see what happens in the world too tomorrow, May 2nd, 1986. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
He has a void like a black hole inside of him.
I was kind of surprised when he had a heart attack, to tell you the truth. I didn't think he had one.
According to Expo officials, getting around the 173-acre site is going to be easy and fun. Hello, I'm Ted Friend, and welcome to VU13's Report on Expo. Travel on-site free with your admission by monorail, overhead gondolas, or shuttle ferry system. Or if you have time, stroll with your family down the Central Boulevard with its many benches and rest areas.
Canada Pavilion sets its sails for the world with royal ribbon cutters to open the new landmark.
I bring you the greetings of Her Majesty the Queen. Together with my wife, we have the greatest pleasure in declaring Expo 86 officially open.
That's right, it's May 2nd, 1986, and Expo 86 is open for business. I'll be returning to Vancouver for one day during the summer to visit Expo, which is going to be a very long day, ending with Bob Newhart concert. Did you guys go to Expo?
My mom and I went, I think, 5 or 6 times over the course of the summer. My dad refused to go because he said it was a complete waste of money, so he did not get to see Expo.
Well, we will do some intros over the course of the summer from various Expo sites that are still standing. I would have watched this episode, number 449, live because I haven't looked for a job yet. And yeah, Friday, May 2nd. Marion Mason, kiss in the stables. She tells him she wants to sleep with him, but she won't be able to lie about it afterwards. They say I love you to each other, and they talk about Mark being different after the accident. But Mary can't say any more to Mason. Mary goes to visit some nuns. She's spotted knocking on the door, and a sister we haven't met before opens. It's not Mother Isabel, so either they couldn't get Mother Isabel, or they thought it wouldn't make sense her opening up her own front door. Mark finds Mason at the stables and says he's been waiting for Mary for 2 hours at the Orient Express. And long story short, he tells Mason to stay away from Mary. Mason breaks into an office and looks through some files and is shocked by what he finds. Now, I presume he's broken into Mark's doctor's office based on Mary's little comment of, I can't go into details, and has found the true nature of Mark's infirmity. Cruz is upset when Eden arrives at the cabana instead of the decoy. Brenda, I think it was. Nick radios them to tell them that Kirk is outside the window. Cruz doesn't really want to go through with any of this with Eden at risk, but Eden starts to kind of sexy things up a little bit to try and goad Kirk. So they talk loudly so that Kirk can hear them, and she shows Cruz the necklace that Kirk gave her and kisses him. Kirk drives away, and when Nick radios them to tell them Kirk is gone, Cruz tells her not to kiss him again. Eden says, we used to fight like this all the time. I miss it. Kirk visits Gina to get her gun, but she refuses, saying he'll be the primary suspect. Look what's going on with David Laurent. They're going to think that wife killing is the latest fashion. Nick radios that Kirk has sneaked past him somehow, and he's actually at the window again. And Nick is not sure if he's armed. At the Orient Express. Well, I guess we should talk about it. Just summarize it, but do you think Kirk has found a gun and is going to burst in? Or?
I don't know. I wasn't really paying that much attention to this storyline, so it was kind of when you were reading it, I was thinking, oh, that's what happened. So I don't really have a lot of comment on it. I'm not actually that emotionally invested in Cruz or Eden, so I don't really care.
I just am interested in what Kirk is up to. So, and it was nice to see Nick having something to do. So.
Yes, actually, that was quite nice. It was kind of nice to see Nick in a situation where he wasn't just chasing after Kelly or fighting with Dylan. It was nice to see him do something different.
I like the Kirk and Gina scenes. So. Well, presumably he will, if he doesn't have a gun, he will just get angry, and they'll have to delay this plan and keep visiting each other in the cabana until Kirk finally does something.
Yeah, I guess that's really, what will move this along is Kirk actually doing something that they can point to and say, oh, look, he's a threat, and, and be able to tie him in with all of these other threats to Eden. I guess that's what they're really going for in this.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a bit convoluted. It seems like a rather complicated way to do it. I think that Cruz's original idea to have a policewoman involved would have probably, I would think, been a lot less of a convoluted plan and might have held up better in court, or would have been more according to a police procedure.
Speaking of convoluted plans, based on past experience on Santa Barbara, I think the best thing for Kirk to do is to plant a bomb in a cabana and wait for the next time Eden goes down there and set off the bomb remotely when he has an alibi, or some similar convoluted thing that can go wrong at the last minute, like when he tried to blow up the cabin. So, I
think what is really needed to thwart the plan that Cruz and Eden have, as you say, is more of a more cello plan than a Kirk plan.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like it would be too simple if he just barged in just in exactly the way they're hoping he will. At the Orient Express, Kelly senses that something is wrong with Sophia, but she won't tell her what it is. Kelly says that she's not ready to see Nick yet. Sophia urges her to find another psychiatrist. Dylan shows up and watches them from another booth. Mark arrives and insists Sophia return for her biopsy. Lionel arrives, and Sophia asks where he's been staying. And Lionel says the sofa circuit. Sometimes Augusta, sometimes Brick and Amy. So that's actually kind of fun. He's on the couch downstairs while Minx is upstairs in the spare room, and the baby's in the dining room, I guess. And I don't know where Marissa's staying.
Maybe Marissa has gone to live with Jade, wherever Jade is.
Oh yeah, Jade. She's still in town, though, in theory, right? Or did she leave town?
I think the last we heard was way back when Brick and Amy were getting married, and they made some sort of comment was that it was a shame that Jade wouldn't be there because she couldn't get home. So I had the feeling she had moved on to somewhere else.
Lionel suggests, how about Sophia's couch? And Sophia says, bad idea. Lionel says, I was kidding. Sophia has noticed that Augusta is warming to Lionel, and Lionel confirms that, and then asks Sophia why she was talking to Dr. McCormick, and Sophia won't discuss it. Kelly tells Sophia she just spotted Dylan, and she looks scared. Sophia holding court at the Orient Express today with multiple visitors visiting her. Gina shows Haley how to put on makeup. And there's a lot of red crap on her cheeks in this episode.
Yes, this was the 80s, though, which was a time of rather heavy makeup.
Yeah, we were just watching something yesterday. I forgot what it was.
I think it was Knots Landing.
Knots Landing, yeah, and everyone suddenly had all this dark red mass on their cheeks. Gina also gives her a yellow dress to wear on her date with Ted. But Gina has to hide as Ted shows up at the Lockridge house looking for Haley, who's almost finished his papers, so he says, I'll finish it tomorrow, let's go on our date. But while he's waiting for Haley to come down, Ted has actually picked up a business card he's found on the floor for a jeweler in Ojai, and mentions it to Haley. So I don't know if Gina heard that Ted found the business card. It's not entirely clear what room Gina is hiding in, because she's not in the living room. I think she might be in the dining room or something like that. You see her just sitting against the wall. We know there's a phone in that room from a later scene, but it's definitely not the living room. So, even though Ted's already had dinner, he takes Haley to the Orient Express, which she points out is very expensive, and he says, "Oh, I get a family discount." Ted tells Haley she's a kind person and has inner strength. Ted says, "I just wish I was more that way." And Haley says, "Oh, I see it in you." When they return home, Ted spots a light go on at the Lockridge house, and Haley tries to convince him it's the caretaker. Gina is almost caught a second time when Lionel shows up at her house. He goes to a secret compartment in the cabinet to the left of the fireplace and takes out a strong box full of certificates. So this is as a result of part of the discussion with Sophia. I think she asks if he needs some money, and he says, "Oh, I have some other secrets that Cece doesn't know about." And I guess he's got some stock certificates or something that's worth something, and presumably is not known about by Brick or anyone else in the family. Haley phones to warn Gina that Ted is on his way, and of course Lionel picks up the phone instead. So we see Lionel pick up the phone in the living room, Gina pick up the phone wherever she is. Haley is shocked to hear Lionel's voice and doesn't say anything and hangs up. Lionel manages to hide behind the door as Ted bursts in, and Lionel sneaks out of the house. Ted, I guess, we left him looking around the house for the source of the light, I guess, so it's possible he might still discover Gina. Who, if anyone, do you think will be the one who discovers Gina?
Wouldn't it be fun if it was Cece?
As he visits his property. It could be Ted. I mean, if the Lockridge just keep coming and going, could be Lionel someday. Or even Minx. Who would be inclined to keep Gina's secret a little longer? Oh, maybe Mason. I don't know. They were not kind of on the outs last time.
Mm-hmm.
Dylan has come up with a great idea. He climbs in Kelly's window. I guess he's kind of jealous that Justin's the only one who gets to do that. Says, "I can do this too." He has written Kelly a letter, which we hear him read to himself in voiceover. And long story short, he'll wait as long as it takes for Kelly. Kelly arrives home unexpectedly, and he fails miserably to hide. She snaps on the light, and there he is. She picks up the phone to call the police, and he grabs it from her and puts his hand over her mouth, which triggers a flashback in Kelly to the time that Peter raped her in Arizona. This is a really good way to get stabbed, I think, sneaking in Kelly's window.
Yeah.
So, we'll see if this encounter leads to Dylan's demise somehow, or if perhaps Justin spotted someone sneaking in her window and comes to the rescue. Either way, Dylan's actions are becoming more and more unhinged, I think, and definitely will culminate into something as we are in the May sweeps, and that's when all the murdering happens.
We're definitely expecting, or at least I'm definitely expecting, to see Dylan murdered, and then the question will be who did it.
I mean, it feels like, if we go by the standard soap things, that Kelly will be suspected because of, all of the everything he does revolves around Kelly. So that's something that it looks like they might be setting up. And that is it for the contents of the episode. We had credits today, and it was, the same people as last time in the credits, with Kirk Cranston having been the last edition. And Peter Flint is Stephen Meadows, and he's in the second section of the credits, and no one else this week. So that is it for week 92. guess I'll spend week 93 looking for work in Kelowna for a summer job. And we will talk a little more about Expo as the summer goes along. And might be something else happening over the weekend that I will talk about on Monday. So we'll see you back here for week 93 of Santa Barbara. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Well, I can be frank with you, woman to woman. David was a wonderful lover. Marvelous, in fact. He was tender, but strong. He was gentle, but intensely